Fear of losing someone doesn't always look like panic. Sometimes it looks like a man suddenly becoming more intentional, more attentive, more protective of the connection he once took for granted. Because when someone realizes your value, their behavior often changes before their words do. You may notice him reaching out more, listening more carefully, making more effort, paying attention to the little things. Suddenly, the things he used to overlook start mattering to him. But here's the question: is he genuinely afraid of losing you, or is he simply afraid of being alone? There's a difference. Real fear of losing someone often reveals itself through consistency, accountability, and a willingness to change, not through jealousy, control, or empty promises. In this speech, we're going to uncover 5 things a man may do when he realizes he could actually lose a woman he values. And more importantly, I want you to understand what those behaviors really mean, so you don't confuse temporary attention with genuine commitment. Because your goal isn't to make someone afraid of losing you. Your goal is to become so secure in your own value that you never have to beg someone to recognize it. When a man begins to realize that he could genuinely lose a woman he values, one of the clearest changes may appear in his consistency. Not necessarily through one dramatic gesture, one emotional speech, or one perfect day, but through the repeated choices he makes over time. He begins to understand that relationships aren't maintained by occasional intensity. They are maintained through everyday effort, attention, communication, and the willingness to show up even when there is no immediate reward. Consistency matters because anyone can make an impressive promise when emotions are high. Anyone can send a long message after an argument. Anyone can suddenly become extremely affectionate when they feel someone pulling away. Genuine change becomes visible when the effort continues after the emotional moment has passed. He starts following through. If he says he will call, he calls. If he makes plans, he makes an effort to keep them. If something changes, he communicates instead of disappearing. He becomes more intentional about showing that his words have meaning. This doesn't mean he suddenly becomes perfect. He may still make mistakes. He may still have busy days, misunderstandings, or moments when he doesn't communicate well. The difference is that he becomes more aware of how his behavior affects the relationship. He starts asking himself, what am I doing to protect this connection? That question can change his behavior before. He may have assumed that the relationship would simply continue because it had always been there. He may have become comfortable and stopped noticing the small things that mattered. But when the possibility of losing someone becomes real, comfort can turn into awareness. He realizes that love cannot survive on assumptions alone. He begins making more effort to stay connected. He checks in because he genuinely wants to know how she is doing. He remembers important details. He follows up on conversations. He notices when something seems different. He becomes more present instead of treating her attention as something guaranteed. But there is an important distinction here. Consistency is not the same as temporary effort. A man who is genuinely afraid of losing a valuable relationship doesn't only become attentive for 3 days. He doesn't suddenly send 20 messages, make dramatic promises, and then return to the same behavior once he feels secure again. Real effort survives the moment of fear. That is why a woman should pay attention to patterns rather than emotional bursts. Does he continue showing up? Does he continue communicating? Does he continue respecting her? Does he continue making time? Does he continue doing what he said he would do? Those questions reveal much more than a single romantic gesture. He may also begin becoming more proactive. Instead of waiting for her to initiate every conversation or make every plan, he starts participating more actively. He suggests things. He creates opportunities to spend time together. He checks whether she needs support. He becomes involved instead of simply responding when she reaches out. That shift can reveal that he no longer wants the relationship to depend entirely on her effort. He understands that if she has been carrying the emotional weight of the connection. Eventually she may stop, and when she stops carrying everything, he has a choice: step forward or let the connection fade. A man who genuinely values the relationship often begins stepping forward. He also becomes more careful about neglect. Things he once considered small may suddenly become important. Maybe she repeatedly asked for better communication. Maybe she wanted more quality time. Maybe she needed him to be more present during important moments. He may begin recognizing that those requests weren't demands for perfection, they were requests for partnership. This is where consistency becomes meaningful. He doesn't simply say, "I understand now." He demonstrates that he understands by behaving differently. He may also become more reliable during difficult moments. It's easy to be attentive when everything is romantic and exciting. The real test appears when there is conflict, stress, disagreement, or disappointment. Does he disappear? Does he become defensive? Does he blame her? Or does he stay engaged and try to understand what happened? A man who fears losing a woman he genuinely values may become more willing to work through uncomfortable conversations because he recognizes that avoiding every difficult moment can slowly destroy a relationship. He begins understanding that repair is part of love. He may also become more appreciative. Sometimes people don't realize the value of someone's presence until they recognize what life would feel like without it. That awareness can make him notice things he previously overlooked: her patience, her support, her humor, her presence, her loyalty, her encouragement, her ability to make ordinary moments feel meaningful. But appreciation becomes meaningful when it is connected to behavior. "I appreciate you" matters. Treating someone as valuable matters more. He begins protecting the connection through his choices. He also learns that consistency creates security. A woman shouldn't have to constantly wonder where she stands. She shouldn't have to analyze every message or interpret every change in behavior. When someone consistently communicates and follows through, uncertainty decreases. That doesn't mean a healthy relationship has zero uncertainty. It means the overall pattern creates trust. He may also begin recognizing the consequences of taking someone for granted. When he realizes that her patience has limits, he may stop assuming she will always remain available regardless of how he behaves. This can be an important moment of maturity, because appreciating someone shouldn't require losing them first. A healthy man learns to recognize value while the relationship is still present. He doesn't need to wait for the door to close before deciding that the person standing beside him matters. And for a woman, this is where discernment becomes important. If a man suddenly becomes consistent only because he senses that she is leaving, she should watch what happens after the crisis passes. Genuine change becomes visible through time. Does the effort remain? Does respect remain? Does communication remain? Does accountability remain? Does he continue choosing the relationship when there is no immediate fear of losing it? Those are the signs worth watching, because the deepest form of effort isn't panic, it's commitment. It isn't about doing everything perfectly. It's about becoming dependable. And when a man truly understands that a woman is not guaranteed to remain in his life, he may begin treating her presence with greater intention, not because he wants to control whether she stays, but because he finally understands that meaningful relationships require two people who continue choosing each other through ordinary days, difficult conversations, changing circumstances, and the quiet moments when nobody is watching. Allowing consistency to become visible not through grand promises, but through the repeated decision to show up, communicate, listen, follow through, repair mistakes, and make the relationship worthy of the trust and effort being given to it. When a man begins to realize that he could lose a woman he genuinely values, he may start noticing the details he previously overlooked. Not because he suddenly becomes a completely different person, but because his awareness changes. Things that once seemed ordinary begin to feel meaningful because he starts understanding that connection is often built through small moments rather than dramatic. What she says, he notices what makes her smile, he pays attention, remembers the little preferences she casually mentioned weeks ago. When something is bothering her, even before she explains it, these details matter. The attention communicates something powerful. Before she spoke and when you made one, little preference just falls within her. I see you. A woman doesn't necessarily need grand romantic gestures to feel valued. Often, she wants to know that the person beside her is actually listening. When he remembers something she said in passing, follows up on something important to her, or notices that she has had a difficult day, it can create a sense of emotional presence. He stops listening only to respond. He starts listening to understand. This can change the entire dynamic of a relationship. Maybe she once mentioned an important meeting, and instead of forgetting about it, he asks afterward how it went. Maybe she told him about a place she wanted to visit, and later he brings it up again. Maybe she has been unusually quiet, and instead of ignoring it, he gently asks whether everything is okay. These moments don't look dramatic from the outside, but they can feel significant to the person experiencing them. He also starts noticing her effort. Perhaps she has been supporting him during difficult periods, encouraging his goals, checking on him, or making time for him even when she is busy. When he becomes more aware of the possibility of losing her, he may finally recognize how much she contributes to the relationship. He sees what he previously considered normal and realizes it was never guaranteed. He may also become more sensitive to changes in her behavior. If she used to initiate conversations constantly and suddenly becomes quieter, he notices. If she stops sharing the little details of her day, he notices. Her energy changes. He may begin wondering why, but healthy attention isn't about becoming paranoid. It is about becoming present. He doesn't assume every change means rejection. Instead, he becomes curious. He asks questions rather than creating stories in his head. He gives her room to explain what she is experiencing. That kind of attention creates emotional safety. He also begins noticing what makes her feel appreciated. Maybe she values quality time more than expensive gifts. Maybe she prefers honest communication. Maybe she feels loved when someone remembers small details or simply sits with her during a difficult day. When he pays attention, he learns her language of connection, and he doesn't have to guess. He listens, he observes, he remembers, he responds. This is one reason small gestures can become powerful. A simple message before an important day, remembering her favorite thing, asking about something she cares about, or noticing when she needs space can communicate more than an elaborate gesture performed once a year. The consistency of small attention creates trust. He may also begin noticing what hurts her. If she repeatedly expressed that certain behavior makes her feel dismissed or unimportant, he starts taking those concerns seriously. Instead of saying, "You're overreacting," he considers whether there is something he needs to understand. That doesn't mean he agrees with every emotion automatically. It means he respects the fact that her experience matters. He also becomes more aware of moments when she needs support without trying to immediately fix everything. Sometimes she doesn't need a solution. She needs someone willing to listen. Learning that difference can transform communication. He starts asking, "Do you want advice, or do you just want me to listen?" That simple question can show emotional maturity, and for a woman, this is where actions become more important than assumptions. Anyone can become attentive temporarily because they fear losing someone. What matters is whether the attention becomes part of his normal behavior. Does he continue remembering? Does he continue listening? Does he continue noticing? Does he continue caring about the small things after the fear disappears? Because genuine appreciation isn't supposed to exist only when someone is about to leave. The little things are often where love becomes visible. A relationship isn't built only through vacations, anniversaries, and dramatic declarations. It is built through ordinary mornings, small check-ins, Remember details, patient listening, thoughtful gestures, and the willingness to notice the person you claim to value, allowing attention to become a daily expression of care rather than a temporary reaction to the fear that someone might finally stop giving you their presence. When a man becomes genuinely aware that he could lose a woman he values, he may begin communicating in a way that is more open, direct, and emotionally honest. For some men, this can be difficult because they have learned to hide uncertainty, avoid vulnerable conversations, or assume that their actions should speak for themselves. When the possibility of losing someone becomes real, he may recognize that silence can create distance just as quickly as conflict can. He starts saying what he actually feels instead of expecting her to guess. He becomes more willing to explain what is happening inside him. He may admit that he misses her, that he appreciates her, that something has been bothering him, or that he is afraid the relationship is becoming distant. That vulnerability can feel uncomfortable. But discomfort doesn't mean weakness. It can mean he is finally willing to risk being emotionally honest. He may also start asking questions he previously avoided. Are you happy with us? Is there something you need from me? Have I been making you feel valued? Is there something I've been ignoring? These questions matter because they show that he isn't simply trying to keep the relationship. He is trying to understand the relationship. He becomes more interested in her experience. Instead of only explaining his own intentions, he listens to how his actions have affected her. That distinction is important. A man can say, I didn't mean to hurt you, and still fail to understand the impact of what happened. Open communication goes deeper. He can acknowledge that his intentions and her experience may not have been the same. He begins taking responsibility for his part. If he made a mistake, he may become more willing to admit it without immediately defending himself. He can say, I handled that badly. Rather than creating 10 reasons why his behavior was justified, that kind of honesty can rebuild trust. He may also become clearer about what he wants. Instead of leaving the relationship in a vague space where neither person knows what they are building, he starts expressing his intentions more directly. He talks about commitment. He talks about the future. He talks about expectations. He talks about what needs to change. And most importantly, he allows the conversation to become two-sided. He doesn't simply make promises because he is afraid of losing her. He asks whether the relationship is healthy for both people. He also learns that communication isn't only about talking when something goes wrong. He becomes more comfortable having meaningful conversations when things are calm. He may share what he appreciates about her, what he hopes to improve, or what he has been thinking about. This creates emotional closeness. He doesn't wait for a crisis to communicate. He starts communicating before the crisis becomes necessary. He may also become more honest about his fears. A man who is afraid of losing someone might not say, I'm terrified you'll leave. Instead, he may show it indirectly through increased attention or concern. Eventually, emotional maturity means being able to name the feeling. I don't want us to drift apart. I care about where this is going. I know I haven't been showing up the way I should. I don't want to take you for granted. Those statements require vulnerability, and vulnerability requires courage. But there is an important difference between vulnerability and emotional manipulation. More than emotional manipulation. I'm afraid of losing you should not become a way to control her choices or pressure her into staying. Genuine communication respects her freedom. He expresses his feelings. He doesn't weaponize them. He also understands that communication must be followed by behavior. If he repeatedly says the right things, but continues doing the same harmful things, words eventually lose meaning. So the woman pays attention to both. What does he say? What does he do? Do they match? Because trust grows when words and actions point in the same direction. He may also become more patient during difficult conversations. Instead of trying to win the argument, he becomes interested in finding a solution. He may ask for time when emotions become intense. Then return to the conversation. Instead of disappearing, he starts seeing conflict as something to work through rather than something to escape. That shift can make a relationship feel very different for a woman. Goal isn't to create fear so that a man finally communicates. The goal is to recognize whether his communication reflects genuine maturity and commitment. If he only opens up when he thinks she is leaving, she should watch whether that openness continues after the relationship feels secure again. Real emotional growth has continuity. It doesn't disappear once the danger passes, and when communication becomes more honest, both people gain something valuable: clarity. They know what the other person feels, what they need, what they expect, and what they are willing to work on. Allowing emotional honesty to replace guessing, meaningful conversations to replace assumptions, and genuine vulnerability to create a relationship where both people can speak openly without fear of being punished for telling the truth. When a man begins to realize that he could lose a woman he genuinely values, he may start understanding her boundaries in a completely different way. A boundary is not a punishment, a threat, or an attempt to control another person. It is a clear statement of what someone is willing to accept and what they will do when something repeatedly crosses that line. For some men, boundaries only become real when they realize there are consequences to ignoring them. If a woman has repeatedly communicated what she needs, he assumed she would always stay regardless of his behavior. He may eventually recognize that her patience has limits. He starts listening differently. Instead of dismissing her concerns as complaints, he begins asking questions. What do you need from me? What made you feel disrespected? What can I do differently? That shift matters because respect begins with taking someone's experience seriously. He may also stop testing boundaries. If she has clearly said that she doesn't accept disrespectful communication, he becomes more careful about how he speaks during disagreements. If she has explained that disappearing without communication is unacceptable to her, he begins understanding that silence isn't a harmless habit. He recognizes that boundaries are information. They tell him how to build a healthier connection with her. But healthy boundaries also require responsibility from the woman. She cannot expect someone to understand boundaries she never communicates. A powerful woman becomes clear rather than expecting people to read her mind. She says what matters to her without unnecessary threats or emotional games. She communicates directly. She says what she can accept. She says what she cannot accept. And then she watches what happens. A man who values her may begin adjusting his behavior because he understands that respect isn't simply about avoiding conflict. It is about recognizing that another person has the right to define what feels acceptable in their own life. He also becomes more aware that her boundaries are not negotiable simply because he disagrees with them. He may have different preferences. He understands that he doesn't get to decide what she must tolerate. That creates mutual respect. He may also begin setting healthier boundaries of his own. This can actually strengthen a relationship because boundaries aren't supposed to exist only on one side. Both people need space, privacy, time, friendships, responsibilities, and personal identities. A healthy relationship doesn't erase individuality. It protects it. When he takes her boundaries seriously, he may become more thoughtful about her time. He doesn't assume she will cancel everything whenever he wants attention. He understands that she has her own goals, responsibilities, friendships, and routines. He respects her life outside the relationship. He may also stop using emotional pressure when she says no. Instead of making her feel guilty, he learns to accept her decision. He can be disappointed without turning disappointment into punishment. That is maturity. He may also become more careful about behaviors that previously seemed small but repeatedly created tension. Interrupting her, dismissing her feelings, invading her privacy, making jokes at her expense, poise. or repeatedly breaking promises can gradually damage trust. When he understands that she may actually walk away, he may finally stop assuming those things will always be forgiven. But again, the important question is whether the change lasts a temporary adjustment made because he fears losing her is different from genuine respect becoming part of his character. A woman should watch the pattern. Does he respect her boundary when he is happy? Does he respect it when he is frustrated? Does he respect it when he doesn't get what he wants? Does he respect it when nobody is watching? That is where the truth becomes visible. Real respect doesn't require constant reminders. He also learns that boundaries can actually make a relationship stronger because they create clarity. Instead of guessing what will hurt the other person or what might cause resentment, both people understand the limits. There is less confusion, less hidden frustration, less silent resentment, more honest communication. And when a man begins taking a woman's boundaries seriously, he may also begin appreciating the strength behind them. He sees that she isn't trying to control him. She is protecting the kind of relationship she is willing to participate in. She isn't saying, "You must behave exactly as I want." She is saying, "This is what I need in order to remain healthy and respected in this relationship." That difference is powerful because when boundaries are respected, neither person has to constantly fight for dignity, allowing the relationship to become less about testing how much one person can tolerate and more about understanding that love without respect becomes unstable. Attraction without boundaries becomes confusing, and commitment without accountability becomes empty, while genuine care is demonstrated through the willingness to listen, adjust, communicate, and consistently respect the limits that allow both people to remain secure in who they are. When a man realizes that he could genuinely lose a woman he values, one of the clearest changes can be the way he begins making space for her in his life. Being a priority doesn't mean she becomes the center of his entire world, or that he abandons his responsibilities, friendships, goals, and personal life. It means he stops treating the relationship as something that will survive automatically and begins giving it intentional attention. He starts making time instead of simply saying he is busy. Everyone has responsibilities. Work can become demanding. Family situations happen. Unexpected problems appear. But when someone genuinely matters, there is usually some effort to maintain connection. A man who is becoming more intentional may begin planning ahead. Rather than constantly leaving her waiting for whatever time happens to remain, he asks when she is available, he plans, he follows through. He creates space for meaningful converse understanding. "I'm busy" cannot become a permanent explanation for emotional absence. He may also start including her in decisions that affect the relationship. Instead of making plans without considering how they influence her, he becomes more collaborative. He wants to know what she thinks. He considers her schedule. He asks about her preferences. This doesn't mean he needs permission for every decision. It means he recognizes that partnership involves consideration. He may also become more intentional about quality time. Being in the same room isn't always the same as being emotionally present. Two people can sit together while both are distracted by their phones, work, or outside problems. A man who truly values the connection may start putting distractions away. He listens, he engages, he asks questions. He becomes present, and sometimes that simple presence communicates more than expensive gifts ever could. He may also begin supporting her goals. If she has ambitions, projects, career plans, or personal dreams, he doesn't treat them as competition. He becomes interested in what matters to her. He asks how things are going. He celebrates progress. He offers support when appropriate. He respects her independence. He understands that loving someone doesn't mean shrinking their world. A powerful relationship allows both people to grow. He may also start making her feel considered in his future plans. This doesn't necessarily mean making dramatic promises about marriage or lifelong commitment. It can simply mean that When he imagines the months or years ahead, he naturally considers her presence. He talks about future experiences. He discusses shared goals. He thinks about how their lives can fit together. That kind of consideration can create security because she isn't constantly wondering whether she has a place in his life. But there is an important distinction between making someone a priority and emotionally dependent on them, becoming emotionally dependent on them. Healthy priority doesn't mean abandoning yourself. A woman should continue maintaining her own goals, friendships, interests, and identity. She shouldn't become his entire world, and he shouldn't become hers. The healthiest relationships involve two people who choose each other without losing themselves. He may also become more dependable when she needs him. If she is having a difficult day, he doesn't necessarily need to solve everything. Sometimes simply showing up, checking in, listening, or offering practical support can make a meaningful difference. He becomes someone she can count on. That reliability is more valuable than occasional grand gestures. He also begins recognizing that attention shouldn't appear only when he fears losing her. If he suddenly becomes extremely attentive when she pulls away, but returns to neglect once she feels secure again, that isn't necessarily lasting change. A woman should look for consistency. Priority is demonstrated through patterns, not panic, not jealousy, not temporary intensity, but through repeated choices to make the relationship matter. He may also become more protective of the relationship without becoming controlling. He avoids unnecessary behaviors that create distrust. He communicates when something changes. He doesn't intentionally create insecurity just to keep her interested. He understands that emotional security is built through clarity, and clarity allows both people to relax. When a man starts making a woman a real priority, she often notices it without needing to ask for proof every day. She feels considered. Her time is respected. Her presence matters. Her voice is heard. Goals are acknowledged. The relationship becomes something he participates in intentionally rather than something he simply expects to continue, creating a healthier balance where love is not measured by how much one person sacrifices, but by how consistently two people make room for each other while still protecting their individuality, responsibilities, ambitions, and sense of self. When a man realizes that he may lose a woman he genuinely values, he may begin looking at problems he previously ignored. Things that once seemed small can suddenly become important because he starts understanding that unresolved issues do not simply disappear. They accumulate quietly, creating distance, resentment, and emotional exhaustion. He begins recognizing that avoiding a problem is still a choice. Maybe she told him that communication was hurting the relationship. Maybe she asked for more effort. Maybe she explained that certain behaviors made her feel dismissed or unimportant. In the past, he may have listened without taking meaningful action. But when he realizes she may actually leave, he begins understanding that words without change are not enough. He starts asking, "What have I been ignoring?" That question requires honesty. He may also become more willing to initiate difficult conversations. Instead of waiting for her to bring up the same issue again, he brings it up himself. He might say, "I know we've talked about this before, and I haven't handled it well. I want to understand what needs to change." That is different from simply saying, "I'm sorry." An apology can be meaningful, but repair requires action. He starts identifying the behavior that created the problem and looks for a different way to respond. If he used to shut down during conflict, he may begin communicating that he needs time instead of disappearing. If he was inconsistent, he may start creating habits that help him follow through. If he dismissed her concerns, he may become more attentive when she speaks. He doesn't just regret the outcome. He examines the pattern. He may also learn that repair isn't about proving who was right. It is about understanding what happened and deciding whether both people are willing to build something healthier from it. That can require humility. He may have to admit that his intentions weren't enough. He may have believed he was doing nothing wrong. because he didn't mean to hurt her. But relationships are affected by impact as well as intention. He begins listening without immediately defending himself. He asks questions. He allows her to explain. He acknowledges what he could have done differently, and then he works on it. He may also recognize that some problems need professional or external support. If communication has become deeply unhealthy, seeking counseling or learning better relationship skills can be a sign of responsibility rather than failure. A willingness to learn demonstrates that he values the relationship enough to improve his ability to participate in it. But repair also requires being honest about what can and cannot be fixed. Not every relationship problem is temporary. Some patterns are to continue. So repairing something doesn't mean accepting everything. It means addressing what can be addressed and recognizing what needs a different decision. A woman should also watch whether his repair attempts are for consistent watch or whatever. One wants her walls. Anyone can become emotional after realizing they might lose someone. The real test comes later. Does he still make the effort? Does he still remember the conversation? Does he still respect the boundary? Does he still change the behavior? Does he still take responsibility when the relationship feels secure again? Because real repair creates a new pattern, temporary panic creates temporary behavior. He may also become more appreciative of opportunities to rebuild trust. He understands that trust doesn't return simply because he says he wants it back. If his actions damaged it, he has to be patient while consistency restores it. He cannot demand immediate forgiveness. He cannot pressure her to forget. He has to demonstrate change over time. That can be difficult because people often want instant results. But meaningful repair is rarely instant. It happens through repeated evidence, one honest conversation, one changed behavior, one kept promise, one respectful response, one moment of accountability, then another and another. Eventually, relationship begins to feel different. The most important part is that he doesn't repair problems simply because he is afraid of being alone. He repairs them because he has developed enough awareness to understand what he could lose and enough maturity to recognize his role in protecting what matters, choosing not merely to stop a woman from leaving in the moment, but to become more intentional, accountable, communicative, and dependable so that the relationship no longer depends on her tolerating the same problems that once made her question whether staying was worth the emotional cost. When a man truly realizes that a woman matters deeply to him, his actions often begin speaking louder than his words. He may say that he cares, that he doesn't want to lose her, or that he wants things to work. Real evidence appears in what he consistently does afterward. Words can create hope, but actions create trust. He begins showing that her presence has meaning in his life. He makes an effort without always being reminded. He communicates when something changes. He follows through on promises. He becomes more attentive to the relationship instead of assuming that everything will remain the same regardless of how he behaves. This is important because genuine care is rarely demonstrated through one dramatic moment. It is demonstrated through patterns. He starts asking himself what kind of partner he is being. He becomes more aware of the difference between saying he values someone and actually making choices that protect the relationship. If he says she matters, does he make time for her? If he says he respects her, does he respect her boundaries? If he says he wants trust, does he behave in ways that create trust? If he says he wants a future, does he make decisions that support that future? Those questions reveal more than promises ever could. He may also become more intentional about repairing mistakes. When he knows that his behavior could push her away, he doesn't simply apologize and expect everything to return to normal. He takes responsibility and works to rebuild what was damaged. He understands that trust is earned through repetition. He also begins treating her emotional needs with greater seriousness. That doesn't mean he must agree with every feeling or solve every problem. It means he listens, asks questions, and tries to understand what she is experiencing. He becomes less dismissive, less defensive, more curious, more present. He may also begin protecting the relationship from unnecessary distractions. He recognizes that certain behaviors create insecurity, confusion, or distrust, and he becomes more thoughtful about the choices he makes. He doesn't intentionally create jealousy to keep her interested. He doesn't disappear to test whether she will chase him. He doesn't use silence as punishment. He doesn't create emotional confusion and call it attraction. Instead, he begins understanding that security is more powerful than games. He also becomes more willing to show appreciation. He notices her effort and doesn't assume it will always be there. He tells her what he values about her. He recognizes the ways she contributes to the relationship, but again, appreciation becomes meaningful when it appears in behavior. He doesn't just say, "You're important to me." He behaves like someone important is standing beside him. That may mean remembering something that matters to her, showing up when she needs support, making time for meaningful conversations, simply being consistent when life becomes stressful. He understands that love is not only what happens during romantic moments, it is also what happens during ordinary days. He may also become more accountable for his future behavior. Instead of making promises he cannot keep, he becomes more realistic. He understands that rebuilding trust requires patience, and that she may not immediately believe everything he says. He doesn't demand instant reassurance. He earns it. This can be one of the clearest signs that his concern about losing her is connected to genuine value, rather than temporary fear. Fear can produce dramatic reactions, but genuine care produces sustained responsibility. A woman should therefore watch what happens after the emotional moment passes. Does he continue showing up? Does he continue communicating? Does he continue respecting her? Does he continue making effort when he feels secure? Does his behavior become more stable rather than simply more intense? Because intensity can disappear, consistency reveals character, and when a man truly doesn't want to lose a woman, he eventually understands that keeping her isn't about controlling her decision to stay. He cannot force someone to remain. He cannot create genuine commitment through pressure. What he can do is become the kind of partner whose behavior gives her a reason to feel respected, valued, safe, and considered. That is where real commitment begins, not with fear, not with possession, not with desperation, but with responsibility. He chooses to show up. He chooses to listen. He chooses to communicate. He chooses to repair. He chooses to repair. He chooses to respect. He chooses to become more intentional. And those choices, repeated over time, become the strongest evidence that he understands her value and is willing to invest in the relationship rather than simply reacting to the possibility of losing it, allowing his actions to communicate what his words alone never could, and making the relationship stronger through the quiet consistency of showing that he doesn't simply want her to stay, but genuinely wants to become someone capable of giving the connection the care, respect, honesty, and effort it deserves.